Hello, thank you for having me here. Today I'm going to talk about Points Unknown, which is a course we've been teaching at Columbia University for the past 4 years. And I'm going to try to do an overview of the course, the origins, the structure of it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have learned from teaching this course. First, how this course started. We have been collaborating a lot between the Brown Institute for Media Innovation, which is located at the Journalism School, and the Center for Spatial Research, which is located in the Architecture School. For some years, we have been doing projects together and working on specific classes, and we saw the need to teach journalists some mapping and spatial analysis skills, and to teach architects, urban planners, and urban designers some investigative skills and some narrative skills that are more akin to what journalists do. And so we saw an opportunity in a program that Columbia University has called the Collaboratory. The Collaboratory is a series of grants that tries to combine data or computational science into other disciplines. So we thought that this would be a great opportunity to bring spatial data into architecture and into journalism. The Collaboratory Grants usually provide funding for 2 years. Usually the first year involves creating the class, and the second year involves implementing it. And in addition, it requires buy-in from the deans of the schools where the classes will be taught, which gives the classes a little bit of a guarantee that they will be kept on the syllabus, and there will be financial support in later years. So we assembled a team composed of Marguerite Holloway, professor and director of science and environmental journalism at the Journalism School; Girga Basic, associate research scholar at the Center for Spatial Research at the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation; Michael Krisch, deputy director of the Brown Institute for Media Innovation at the Journalism School; and myself, Juan Saldarriaga. At the time, I was the Mellon Research Scholar at the Center for Spatial Research. In addition, we got an advisory board made out of industry members and academics. And we started planning the course. And what we did was we went out into the industry, so to journalism organizations, and we surveyed them, and we tried to understand what tools they were using to perform their work. We also talked with a lot of architecture, urban design, and urban planning professors, and we even visited some architectural studio reviews to see what kind of work architects were doing, specifically in terms of mapping, data visualization, and site analysis. After this, we concluded that our goals for this course would be to, first of all, to be a bridge between disciplines. We wanted to bring investigative techniques and reporting into architecture, and spatial thinking into journalism. We also wanted to teach students how to investigate a site through research, interviews, data analysis, and geospatial operations. And we wanted to show students how to write and create interactive narratives that could showcase their work and spread it to a broad audience. So the structure of our course is consists of 3 parts. One, a full semester course for GSAP students. GSAP is the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation. Second, a 4-session workshop for journalism students. And now this is new for this year, a full semester course for journalism students in the data program. We would have loved to create just 1 course for all students, but unfortunately, due to bureaucratic hurdles at Columbia University, we were not able to merge both architecture and journalism students into the same class. So first, I'll talk a little bit about the journalism workshop. It's usually twice per year, and it consists of 4 3-hour sessions. It serves mainly as an introduction to mapping and spatial analysis. We cover the basics of mapping, spatial analysis, so layers, projection, types of data, classification methods, working with census data, creating annotated 3D scenes, and basic geoprocessing operations. We also include a little bit of interactive web maps. And from the beginning, these workshops were taught using QGIS. We knew that in journalism, we could only use a free and open source tool, so no ARC or Esri products. A lot of freelance journalists cannot afford their licenses, and even leading news organizations like the New York Times, ProPublica use QGIS as their main mapping tool. The full semester course at GSAP, so at the architecture school, it usually runs from 12 to 14 weeks, and it goes into much more detail, both in terms of the basic mapping and geospatial analysis, as well as in building a fully developed scrollytelling piece anchored in maps. In addition, students also learn basic reporting skills like interviewing, working with public data, creating press clippings, and writing a pitch. In addition, and I think this is one of the most important parts of our course, we bring editors into this full semester course. This is something that GSAP doesn't often do. They don't often bring people outside of their disciplines to work with students, but we thought it would be great to bring professional journalists to advise the students throughout the semester. So previous editors have included Nadia Popovich from the New York Times, Drumel Mita from 538, Alison McCartney from Bloomberg, Ana Graciela Mendez from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Sarah Slovin from Reuters. And this gives students a real taste of what it is to produce a real journalistic piece, and it gives them great advice, especially in finding the right story to tell. We also, of course, bring guest speakers to present students with a range of projects and techniques. We brought in, recently we brought in Alison Killing from BuzzFeed. She's the first architect to win a Pulitzer Prize, so that was super relevant. We brought Francesca Berardi to present an amazing work that she's done using oral histories around canners in New York City. And we brought in Jeremy White from the New York Times to talk about their projects, especially about their recent Tulsa, the Tulsa Massacre piece. So how has the course evolved throughout the last 4 years? First, the GSAP course started using ArcGIS products because those are the most commonly used products in the industry. And that's what architects and urban planners usually use, are usually taught in school. But we soon realized that QGIS was as powerful for what we were using it for. And we could we could use the same materials that we were using in the journalism workshop. We also added Mapbox scrollytelling template. Even though it's a very bare bones template, it gave us much more flexibility than doing the same thing through ArcGIS story maps. So this is some of the examples of the work produced by GSAP students in 2020. These are two pieces. The one on the left is looking at housing up in Inwood in Manhattan, and the one on the right is looking at the redevelopment of the Gowanus Canal. After that, we decided to convert our course and teach it completely in programming, so completely through coding. This meant leaving QGIS behind and bringing Python as our main programming language, GeoPandas as our main spatial analysis library, Altair as the main visualization library, and Google Colab as the main platform. The conceptual structure for the course stayed the same, but technically our course was radically different. And in making this jump, we were able now to emphasize reproducibility, shareability, and transparency, which are already core values in academia and in the journalism practice. And this is examples from the work that GSAP students produced in the spring of this year, using Colab and Python as our main working tools. You can see that they're very different in terms of how they flow, but students learned a lot. And I'll talk a little bit about this in more detail right after this. The work on the left is looking at census data, especially in Native American reservations. And the work on the right is looking at housing and environmental data, focusing on Little Haiti, on the neighborhood of Little Haiti in Miami. And this is work from the journalism students in the data concentration from this summer, using also coding, but creating their final pieces through Mapbox scrollytelling. The work on the left is looking at pollution from gas plants in California, and the work on the right is looking at infrastructure in bridge, specifically bridges around the Mississippi. So what does it mean to teach mapping and spatial analysis through programming, and how does that affect the class? First, we needed to teach also basic programming, Python, Pandas skills and concepts, which added a lot of work to our class and to our students. Second, there's a lack of easy visuals that will help students understand the data and what they're doing, It's not like you're in QGIS or ArcGIS that you're just seeing the data, seeing the map immediately, and just clicking on things. Third, everything needs to be much more specific and declared. For example, you have to be very careful with coordinate reference systems, and you have to specify them. A lot of the geoprocessing operations take multiple parameters that need to be specified. So that means paying much more attention to detail. Finally, these tools are still under development, and their documentation is scattered. I know that ArcGIS documentation is very good. It is not the same for GeoPandas or Altair. They do have documentation, but it is not as fully fleshed out as ArcGIS is. At the same time, programming means that students learn much more. In addition to mapping and spatial analysis and the reporting skills that we teach them, they also learn coding. It also forces them to think differently. It's a different interface. They're no longer point and click, but they have to type things. It forces them to pay attention to detail and to learn the intricacies of spatial analysis and geoprocessing. They also learn how to find help and answers on their own. There's a lot of going to Google and Stack Overflow, and there's a lot about knowing what answers will help you and how to ask the questions in a way in which you will find the right answer. And finally, it takes them out of their comfort zone, which we found that it was a good surprise for students. So here are some feedbacks from the students. First, I registered for the class to continue learning in the world of GIS. The decision to learn Python this semester was a nice surprise, and I was even more excited to be taking this class. Also, register because of its interdisciplinarity, perspective between journalism, narrative, and spatial data content. I was hoping to learn QGIS going into the course, but was pleasantly surprised to find Python as the main tool. And finally, the nature of the course is certainly a challenge. For instance, learning how to code, interview skills, and data viz at the same time, but it's a positive challenge. So speaking of challenges, what are the challenges that we've encountered in teaching this course? The first set of challenges come from our efforts to bridge both disciplines, architecture and urban design and journalism. Architects and designers really struggle with breaking free from their visual concepts and language and creating a solid narrative. Specifically, they have a lot of trouble moving away from standard architectural topics, such as water towers. Every semester, a group of students wants to do a project on water towers in New York City. And instead, we try to get them to focus on data that has a human element, not just a physical presence. They often struggle to move beyond just mapping or visualizing the data. Investigating, querying, and analyzing data is not something that comes easily to them. Finally, there's very little emphasis on transparency and reproducibility in their profession, where most designs are one-offs. And even the software, the architecture software, doesn't allow them to record the steps that they do to produce their designs in an easy way. On the other hand, journalism students often struggle with finding data that has a spatial component. They are great at finding interesting data sets, but not necessarily with a spatial element. In addition, they're very good at finding great human stories in great angles, but often fail to zoom out to try to understand how this phenomena play out in space. In other words, journalism students are very interested in finding the outlier, but in focusing only on the outlier, they risk missing the overall picture. This is compounded by the lack of easy visuals. So they are focusing on just one thing and they don't see how the phenomena plays out in space throughout the country or throughout the region they're studying. And what surprises did we get? First, we expected there to be a great difference in graphic skills. Architects and designers are, after all, constantly thinking through drawing. So we expected them to be much, much better at creating visuals in our class. However, we found that this was not the case. In fact, it can be said that journalism is leading the way in graphics, experimenting and finding new, better, and more interesting ways to tell stories visually. Whereas the current kind of visuals that architects and urban designers are producing might not be suited to build a compelling narrative. These days, they're often using collages and simulating hand drawings, which are not necessarily good for this kind of work. So what's a way forward? First, we're constantly adjusting our course, both in terms of the tools and techniques that we are teaching, as well as in the examples that we choose, the data sets that we use, and the assignments we give out to the students. For our next iteration, we'll probably get rid of our spatial statistics and Earth Engine lectures. They were not relevant to the work the students are producing and the work that the industry is doing, and they were overburdening the class. So in addition, this will certainly make the course a bit lighter. We've gotten a couple of complaints from students that there is too much work involved in this class, so getting rid of those sections could make the semester a little bit easier. So if you want to check out further documentation or some of the tutorials that we have produced, our website is open and it has a lot of the materials that we use in the class. The address is pointsunknown.nyc, and I will take questions. Thank you very much.